This is the classic situation in a TV series, right? The police need to catch the bad guy, but they only have a blurred frame from the CCTV. So the main one asks the tech guy to zoom in and enhance. And this is not something that you might actually ever happen to you in real life. But if you work with me, it might happen that I tell you to enhance something. Now, before you move on with your life, asking yourself why this weirdo like the word enhance so much, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paolo Ricciuti, and I come from Campobasso, Italy, the land of pizza. You can find me as Paolo Ricciuti on Twitter. I should say X, but it's Twitter. You can find me as Paolo Ricciuti on GitHub. I'm a Svelte ambassador, which means that I am basically don't shut up about Svelte enough that the maintainers decide to make it official. And I'm a full stack software engineer at Main Matter, which is very cool because I get to work with Svelte, but also I get to teach Svelte because we are running a workshop. You can scan the QR code if you want, but also because we do what's called team augmentation, which means that basically we empower our clients to learn Svelte so that they can maintain the project themselves. And the reason why I might tell to you enhance is because I'm very keen on progressive enhancement. So what progressive enhancement is? This is from Wikipedia. Progressive enhancement is a strategy in web design that puts emphasis on the web content first, allowing everyone to access the basic content and functionality of a web page, whilst users with additional browser feature or faster internet access receive the enhanced version instead. Now, there are a couple of points that I want to point out. First, everyone to access the basic content. This is very, very important. You want everyone in the world to access your website. Like, this is very, very important for e-commerce, for example, but in general, whichever kind of website you are building, you want the most people to access it, right? So even one with like low internet connection that lives in poor countries that are under the tube, so they don't like there's no signal, that are behind a firewall that blocks JavaScript. So all of these people needs to access your website, and the one that have faster internet connection, that have data available that are not behind a firewall, they will get an enhanced version instead. And this is very important because this tells you something. It's not important to serve the exact same experience both from the one that are not using JavaScript and one that are using JavaScript. Now, small spoiler ahead and small I want to advise you, like I will be using Melt UI for some of those examples. Melt UI is a very cool component library for Svelte that it's a headless component library. So they just provide you with the behavior and you can style your component however you want. But one important bit is that the reason why I'm using Melt UI is not because it's bad, but just because they are providing you with component that does not exist in HTML. So they need to use JavaScript to actually make it work. And so this means that, I mean, out of the box, they don't work without JavaScript. And in this talk, we will see ways to hopefully make them work. So let's go ahead and start with the very first example. This is a very simple page, right? You have a form with an input autocomplete, a button to submit the form. The form is actually using the get method, so it's basically it will update the URL, the load function will run, and then, I mean, if what we are searching, like this is just to get if we are actually searched something or not. If we found something, we show the title and the thumbnail. Otherwise, we show no video found. And the input autocomplete is very, very simple. You have a list of suggestions, and this function, fetch suggestion, that just go ahead and fetch the autocomplete with the query and return the JSON and set the value, like the value by default is void. And on input, you just fetch the suggestions, and down there is this UL, and you show the list of suggestions. Obviously, this can be done better. You should handle like race condition and all this stuff, but it's out of the scope of this talk. It's just to make a point, right? So let's see how does this look. Now, as you can see, we have two browser windows here, and this is the load function that is running that I told you before. And the reason why I show you this is because there is an error here. I mean, it's not exactly an error, but this doesn't help with progressive enhancement. And you will see a lot of these browser windows inside this presentation. And I want to point out that these are literally the same page. There are two iframes, and this one has JavaScript enabled, this one has JavaScript disabled. So this is literally the same page. Let's see how this input autocomplete work. I can type here, and if I try Gelf, for example, I get this Gelf Rich, Svelte Transition Accessibility. I click here, it will get autocomplete, and I search, and I get this very wonderful presentation from Gelf on Svelte Transition and Accessibility from Svelte Fall Summit. Now, if I try to do the same thing here, as I've said, JavaScript is disabled. And this means that this input autocomplete cannot work. I have to rely on the basic input. But if I try to search, no video found. Why? Well, because inside my load function, I assumed that everyone would have used my autocomplete. And so I just basically search from the Svelte Summit talk with a triple equal. So I just tell, okay, if the title is equal to the search, just go ahead and show the show. Otherwise, return undefined null. So one simple way to fix this, it's this. Object title includes search. This is it's a very simple fix, but it works. Now, when I have JavaScript, I can use the accessibility, I can use my autocomplete, and I search and I get the talk. But the user that doesn't have JavaScript because maybe they are behind a firewall or because they don't have faster internet, so it's still downloading, and I search Gelf and I search, I still get the same result. So this tells us a couple of things. First, whenever possible, try to use HTML elements that are already capable of sending the information to the server, like form, button, link, input, right? So those are designed to send information to the server, and you should use them whenever possible. So in this case, we were already using an input, and we were just enhancing the experience of the input for the user that has JavaScript. Second, when you receive data, always assume the form or the link has been submitted without JavaScript and act accordingly. This is very important because if you assume that the one that use your application does not have JavaScript, you can modify your server-side code to allow for progressive enhancement. Let's move to another example. This is another very normal and easy example, right? So I have this form with this data Svelte kit keep focus, which means that Like if there is JavaScript enabled, when you submit the form, it will not lose focus on the input. And then you have this input with a name of search, and on input we are just requesting the submit of the form. This means that whenever we type, we get auto submission, the URL will update, the load function will update, and this list of ambassadors will update. And so basically we can filter them on the server side. So let's see how it works. Now, if I try to search Thomas, I get Thomas, Enrico, I get Enrico, Kev, I get Kev. So this is very cool, right? But this has a huge problem without JavaScript, because if I try to search Thomas, obviously this on input will never run because we don't have JavaScript. And what's worse is that we cannot submit this form. I mean, in this very case, given that there is just a single input, the browser helps you, and if you tap enter, it will actually submit the form. But this is only true for one input. So if there was another input, it would have not worked, but also the user would have no way of sending this information to the server. So they basically could not use your website. The fix to this is very simple. Just add a button. So if you add a button, you can style it however you want, obviously, and this will allow the user to submit the form. So inside this part, if I have JavaScript, I can search for Thomas. I don't have to use the button, but I can if I want. But when I don't have JavaScript, I can search and I can tap the button to get the result that I want. So this also teaches us a couple of things. First, always provide a fallback to submit a form without JavaScript. Don't assume your user will have JavaScript. So even if it's, controversial, always provide a button inside a form. And also don't be afraid of changing the design if that leads to better UX. Like in this case, the original design didn't feature a button, but it's better for our users. So you should fight for your users to have a better experience. And this is very important when you are not the one making the design. We work with designers, so sometimes it might happen that the designer just didn't think about the user because maybe they tell, a button it's bad, it's ugly. So fight with your designers to allow your users to use your platform. Let's move to the next example, right? Here we have a very cool form. We have a select, which contains all the tutorial from learn.svelte.dev, and it's a form method post, so we can submit this form and we get the tutorial back from inside the form object. And if we have the tutorial back, we say visit the tutorial and we show the link for the tutorial, right? Very simple. Now, this is a multi-UI select. And as you can see, it's very good. Like it's styled different. It provides extra information, like what part of the tutorial is there. And this is just a probably silly example because I designed it and I kind of suck at design. But you can imagine that, for example, you are selecting a country and you want to show the flag or something similar. Now, there are ways to do that in HTML, in raw HTML that are coming, but it's not supported yet. And also this is a combo box, so I can actually literally search for something. So I can say, for example, await, and I search for await. So, it's very cool, right? And it works, but it has a huge problem. Again, without JavaScript, this can't exist. This is an input, but as long as I click here, I don't get anything, and I cannot select anything, and I cannot search anything, right? So it's a very bad user experience. So how can we fix this? What we want is that inside our select, we are using the melt select and passing the tutorials as options and with the name of tutorial. We want that if there's no JavaScript, I want a normal select, right? It might be a way of thinking. How can we achieve this? Now, there are ways to style things differently when there is JavaScript and when there's not. One way is with actions. So an actions in Svelte is something that you can attach to an element. And in this case, what I'm doing is that I'm creating this action, remove class. And this remove class action take a node and the class to remove, and simply does node.classlist.remove to remove. Very, very easy, right? Then you create this div, you initialize it with a class of Node.js, and then you use remove class Node.js. You then can style this Node.js with an opacity of 0.2. For example, you could say display none, for example. And this means that when JavaScript kicks in, this action will run, will remove the class, and the style will change. Very easy, right? So as you can see up there, like the style in the JS word has changed, and the style in the non-JS word is still opacity 0.2. But this has a problem. The problem is that if you have two input, like the melt UI select and the normal select inside a form with the same name, even if one is display none, it will still submit. So on the server, we will still get some browsers and bot information, so you get two values. Some others just override the previous one. So this is very risky and you should not do it. What do we want is that we want that when there's no JavaScript, we just show the single normal select. When there's JavaScript, we swap that with the new multi-UI select. And the way we can do this with very, very simple component. This is literally just this 5 line of code. I call it noSSR. And this basically allows you to show nothing if during SSR. So if you wrap something inside this noSSR component, it will not show up during SSR. And you can also provide a fallback, which is very useful in this case. And how it works is that it uses the await block in Svelte with an already resolved promise. So this will resolve as soon as JavaScript kicks in. I did some experiment, and this is the fastest that, like, it's the first thing that actually changes when JavaScript kicks in. So basically, this will resolve as soon as JavaScript kicks in. And this means that during server-side rendering, this will not resolve because JavaScript is not there yet, and the fallback will be shown. But as soon as JavaScript kicks in, the other slot, the default slot will be shown. So how can we use this? We can import the melt select. We can import the normal select. We can import the noSSR component and the tutorials. And what I say is that inside this noSSR, I put the melt select as the default. So this is what will not be rendered during server-side rendering, and it will be rendered when JavaScript kicks in. And I add a slot of fallback to this normal select, and this means that this will be rendered during server-side rendering. The result is this. Can you spot the difference? Personally, I cannot. They are styled the same, but now the very cool thing is that when I click here, I get this very cool solution with Melt UI, and I can click and I can search and I can submit the form and it works. But when the user has no JavaScript, so even for the first millisecond that has no JavaScript, this is a normal select. And I mean, it's uglier. You cannot search, you cannot style these things differently, but at least the user can still use your website. Very cool, right? So with this kind of technique, there is also another thing that you might think it's impossible to actually make it work. And this is a dialogue. A dialogue is a very weird piece of information, weird piece of component, because we actually use dialogues a lot, but they are completely reliant on JavaScript. So I can open the dialogue and I get my content. Obviously, this is a silly dialogue, and I can close the dialogue. Very cool. But I mean, it's a problem because without JavaScript, it doesn't work. So obviously, you should also think about what do you put inside a dialogue, because if you put something super key, super important, you should probably find a way to not put it in a dialogue. But I mean, if you want to show a dialogue, it's fine to do something. And what you can do is actually use the noSSR component and show a link to another route styled exactly like the button. So this is basically how we are creating the dialog with Melt UI, and with Melt UI you are spreading this trigger on a button, and this is basically what allow Melt UI to open the dialog with JavaScript. But I mean, again, this doesn't work without JavaScript. So what you do is you wrap everything, like the whole dialog, inside this noSSR component, so nothing gets rendered until JavaScript is available. And you, as a fallback, you render a link to another route. And I mean, this is uglier probably because obviously look at this beautiful dialog, but at least the user that does not have JavaScript can click and see his content. Obviously, again, you have to be aware of the fact that it's changing a route, so you probably will lose information. But let's say that you just want to signal something to the user without having him lose all of your data in a form, for example. You should not use it like this way, but there are ways around this to make it work. This is just a silly example, obviously. So another important lesson: if you are losing, just change the rules, right? So in this case, I mean, you literally cannot do anything with a dialog. So there's not much you can do unless you change the rule. So you want a dialog? I mean, if you have no JavaScript, you get a link. It's okay. You will end up seeing the content of the dialog anyway. Let's go ahead with another example. And this is a very complex example. It's the most complex example that we have here, but it's also something that I wanted to show you because also showcase how you can fix something very, very easily. So this is a very normal use case, right? You have the layout of Svelte, and inside your layout at the bottom, you have this form to subscribe to your newsletter because your newsletter is awesome, obviously. And I mean, this is shown basically in every page, right? So every page you go, you see this join my newsletter at the bottom. And you can type in and you do paolo.ricciuti@mainmatter.com and you join and you get this alert. Obviously, don't use alert, actually use a normal alert box because alerts are being deprecated. But it's cool, right? From whichever page I'm on, I can actually just subscribe to my very, very good newsletter, right? Now, the reason, the way it works is that we are using enhance, which is a function provided by Svelte itself, that when JavaScript is enabled, basically make this form act as a normal fetch. And in this case, we are sending this information to this subscribe route that we have here. And inside this subscribe route, we have a plus page.server.ts that export an action, a default action, to actually do your subscription. You store the email in the database, you probably sell it to some hacker, I don't know. And what you can do with use enhance, you can pass a function, and this function will run before the form actually gets submitted, and you can return a function, and this will be run when the action finish. So at the end of the action, you get a result.type, which might be success if the user actually has successfully submitted, or if you throw an error here, you will get a type of error. But what we can do is that if type is success, you show the alert subscribed, and you can call this update function to reset the form, to clear the input, to update the store, etc. This obviously has a problem because it doesn't work with JavaScript. And the reason why it doesn't work is because this is a very single bit of functionality that differ if you use enhance. And was made specifically for this very use case, because by default, the form in Java, in HTML, if you are pointing to this subscribe page, when you submit, it will actually try to navigate to subscribe. So if I do paolo.ricciuti at mainmatter.com and I submit, I will get a 500 error. Why is that? I mean, in this case, the action actually runs fine, but when there's no JavaScript enabled, so this doesn't kick in, what happens is that the browser is actually navigating to /subscribe. And in this case, we don't have a page. So how do we fix this? We just add a subscribe plus page.svelte. Thank you for subscribing. And now when I click paolo.ricciuti at mainmatter.com, I join. Thanks for subscribing. So progressive enhancement is an art in itself. So there's no pre-made solution. So go ahead, experiment, mess around, stay angry and stay foolish. I mean, no. Find a way to get your content to your users. But most importantly, thanks for watching.